Thanks so much for sharing your garden experiences with us here at Central Texas Gardener. And coming up next, one of my favorite people in North America, Richard Louv. Rich and I have known each other for a number of years, author of Last Child in the Woods, a book about what he calls nature deficit disorder in American youth, which has created a nationwide, if not international, movement to get kids reconnected with nature. Rich is here to also celebrate his new book, The Nature Principle. Welcome to Central Texas Gardener.
Well, thanks. Good to see you again.
Well, gardening has something to do with Last Child in the Woods and The Nature Principle both. There's something very special about the activity of gardening.
Well, there is. There's a new body of evidence. Actually, there's more evidence about gardening and human health than some of the other aspects of connecting to nature that goes back a ways. But certainly psychological well-being, physical health, a sense of place, a sense of who you are, your identity in a bioregion, all of that is wrapped up in gardening. And gardening really is a way for both kids and adults to connect to nature. And while Last Child in the Woods was about nature deficit disorder, which, by the way, is not a known medical diagnosis. Maybe it should be, but it's a way to talk about this.
I think it should be.
Yeah, it's a way to talk about this thing we didn't have a language to use about. But adults, the next book, The Nature Principle, looks at adults too. We need nature for our psychological health, our physical health, our spiritual health.
When so much of what we consider health has roots in our childhood experiences. And just to dwell on Last Child for a moment before we launch into the new book, I teach classes about gardening all the time and about the impact of gardening in individual lives. And I ask people about their favorite memories associated with the outdoors. And time after time after time, I'll hear stories about my grandmother's garden or those sorts of things. And those really meaningful, powerful places in people's lives that they really think of as treasured often are the garden spaces we create.
Early in the Nature Principle, I told a story about my father. And in my family, the best times were outdoors in nature. And I kind of say this as kind of a confession, say, I have my bias too. That's one of the reasons I write about nature and human beings. And I remember being in the garden. We had a big vegetable garden in the backyard, and watching the back of his neck and how the dirt would get between the creases of his very tan neck, and getting the stones out of his way when he was working and all of that. And I loved those times with him. And it's one of the reasons that and fishing and doing other outdoor things with my father and my mother. But over time, he began to withdraw. And his dream was to retire and move to the Ozarks and fish all day. And he retired early, moved down. But by that time, the mental illness and the alcoholism had taken him pretty far. And he never really left the kitchen table. So to me, I always associated health with that garden and with fishing. And as he withdrew from that, he withdrew from health. And he had a sad end. And, I always wondered what would have happened if mental health professionals then had known about nature therapy, something he clearly loved. Now, whether that would have really helped him or not, I don't know. But it does, form this idea that goes certainly deep within me that our health, our well-being is very much connected to that experience in a garden or on a lake or on a stream.
Well, to me, it makes perfect sense to think of a species of animal, which we are, that spent 1.5 million years in development, living in the most intimate contact with nature. And then only in the last generation or two has that link been severed. And the consequences of which we really are incalculable, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's a price to pay for that. Evolution doesn't work that fast. But the good news is that along with the evidence that there had been this dramatic break between children and nature for a lot of reasons, electronics is only one of them, bad urban design, traffic, stranger danger, fear of that, even though the fear outranks the reality in most neighborhoods. There's another body of evidence that came forth at the same time, which is attention deficit disorder. The symptoms of that get better very quickly with just a little bit of contact with nature, learning, creativity, physical health. Child obesity is linked to this. Now we're talking about really a pandemic of inactivity that is producing myopia in epidemic measures. The good news is that we can turn all of that to good news. The more our schools have nature and the more our houses, the more
our gardens,
are involved, the more contact we have with the natural world, and to a degree we're going to have to create that natural world.
Yeah. Well, and that's the beauty, I think, of the nature principle. It's this very anti-apocalyptic book, in a sense. Yeah. We're so used to thinking about the future in terms of negatives, of decline, of damage, of loss. But the book is filled with hopeful ideas about a future that where mankind plays a healing role, a very proactive role in healing the world. And gardening has a central role in it.
Yeah, and it's way beyond sustainability. Got to do that. Very important to have energy efficiency, but that's not enough. We'll never get to that unless our goal is a lot higher. But we need to be very careful how we talk to our kids and ourselves about the future. I'm convinced that most Americans carry around images of the far future that in their heads that look a lot like Blade Runner and Mad Max and Hunger Games. It's a post-apocalyptic future. And in fact, for young adults now, the #1 literature genre is called dystopic fiction. And it's even beyond vampires. I mean, in these books, even vampires don't have a good time. But if we're accepting that without a positive alternative, then we're really in trouble. I mean, Martin Luther King didn't talk. The name of his speech was, as others have said, wasn't "I have a nightmare," and it wasn't that he stopped talking about the bad news, but he held out this promise that someday it would be better. And people had images in their head, and he often said that any culture, any movement will fail if it cannot paint a picture of a world that people will want to go to.
Yeah.
We've been failing at that. So it's time to get busy on that. And that's part of the reason for the nature principle, at least within my limited abilities to paint some of that picture.
Well, one of the beautiful pictures you paint is of a national park composed of gardens. And I love that idea.
Yeah. Doug Ptolemy, who is a botanist in Delaware, has written a book called Bringing Nature Home about the power that gardeners have to bring back biodiversity by using their backyards and front yards. If we, it's not just the Amazon rainforest. What if we did this? And his idea, my wife talks about creating a butterfly zone in our neighborhood by planting native plants that bring back butterfly migration routes. Doug takes it a step further. He says, what if it wasn't just our yard? What if it was that yard and that yard and that yard, and maybe over to the next city? And what if it went all the way through North America or the United States? And he calls that, if we start today, we could create the first homegrown national park. We don't have to wait for government. We don't have to wait for anybody. We can start it right now. Think of the power that kids would feel if they were part of something that large.
And we need those big, bold, beautiful metaphors, really, to erase the negative images that people are carrying around. I think it's a great concept.
There's a metaphor I've been talking about that William McDonough, the author who writes about, that says everything that we do can be recycled and should. I visited his office a few months ago, and I saw this architectural drawing. He's working on a hospital in Spain. Beautiful drawing. One side, solar panels done in the colors of a butterfly that's going extinct in that region, bioregion. Another side is a green wall, and then a third side is a vertical garden that will feed the people in the hospital. So, this building is, yes, saving energy, but it's also producing human energy. It's going the next step through the food, through the, people get well faster if they have a view of nature, but he doesn't stop there. The bottom floor of this building, if it gets built, is all glassed in, and they're going to raise butterflies there. The butterfly that's about to go extinct, and they're going to open the doors and make a ritual of it every now and then, and let
Love
those
it.
butterflies go in their community, and
Well-
they're gonna get all kinds of other people to help them with it.
Well, that's a beautiful idea to close our conversation with, Rich. The idea of opening doors to a new future filled with fluttering wings and people fed and nourished through the environment that they create with their own hands, which is in our power to do.
Yeah, some people will dismiss that as overly idealistic, and to me, that's the point.
Well, we need those beautiful
Yeah.
ideas. We need your work out there in the community. And thank you so much for the contributions you have made to the life of this country and to the ideas that are out there. So it's always a pleasure to see you, Rich. Thank you so much for being on Central Texas Gardener.
Thanks, Tom.
And coming up next is our friend Daphne.